As you mentioned, your leadership journey began leading volunteers. So tell me how that led to then wanting to learn more about leadership and becoming a stakeholder executive, helping other leaders lead others.
Wow, what a synopsis for what I need to speak on now. This is great. Where to begin? You know, I've always been a very active, very, very active individual. I've been called things like an electron that just doesn't want to stop because, as you said, when I get passionate about something, I can't turn it off. And I mean that in a good way. It's not like it's something that plagues me, but it's an itch. And with well, I'll tell you a little bit how these interact as a precursor to the story. If I find something worth challenging, or if I see something that is unchallenged and needs to be challenged, because anything unchallenged, I think, should be to some degree challenged with some obvious parameters. The next natural step is to make sense of it, understand why it is the way that it is before you can go in and challenge it. And some things that have guided my thought, you know, I'll butcher the quote, but it was something to the effect of a man who knows little of his opponent's, in an argument sense, knows little of his opponent's argument, also knows very little of his own. So even again, as an early age, I start thinking, if I'm going to have a deeply held opinion, well, I need to understand this from all angles before I'm even allowed to have that strong opinion. And so that thrill of making sense, or I should say the pursuit of making sense under the thrill of challenge, has been a guiding force. And I'd almost venture to say that mastery happens by accident, because I don't necessarily pursue mastery the way a typical specialist would. I'm through and through a utility player as a generalist. But mastery happens through making sense, which happens because of challenge. So coming all the way back into how I even got into leadership was I was a musician, and I picked up, I mean, I grew up in a musical household, but I got my first guitar, you know, right at the cusp of becoming a teenager, and I couldn't put it down. I'm a social butterfly, and all of my friends sort of melted into the peripherals, and it was just guitar every day. So I was logging during school days, 7 to 9 hours of practice, during weekends and summer, 13 hours a day, nonstop. And I never had a curriculum. I never sat down and read a book or took classes. I wonder what happens if I do this. What if I played it this other way? What if I brought in, my father was a drummer, so I grew up behind a drum kit. What if I brought in these rhythmic elements to the guitar? And would it sound a little different? So discovering my way through this, and then when I would play with others, I became almost a default leader in saying, let's try it this way, let's try it this way. And this spurred an interest in production. It spurred an interest in, you know, if I'm going to explain this keyboard line, I really need to learn to play it. If I'm going to, you know, guide the singers, I need to learn to sing. And so I became a multi-instrumentalist, and this continuous, I wonder if we could do this differently, not better, just differently, for whatever reason. Let's make sense of it, and let's make sense of it by picking up these other instruments. Now that mastery starts to come along, and at this time I'm proficient in guitar, drums, bass, keyboard, vocals, production, and sound engineering. And so that put me into positions of leadership by accident that I didn't seek, I didn't want, I didn't crave, and I don't necessarily resent, but I really wanted to apply my craft. And so, you know, over the years, this turned into producing albums. This turned into touring, you know, locally, playing at festivals. It turned into international touring. That's what first took me to Asia, was touring Canada, US, Mexico, Japan, and Korea. And then falling in love with kimchi and Korean people and the culture. And so this thread of sort of being thrust into leadership positions became a commonality with whatever I was doing. And that occurred in sports, it occurred in music, it occurred in various areas. As I got into the Marshall Goldsmith ecosystem, it also happened naturally. So I was hired to sort of decompress some of the workload of my manager, And it's like, I'm noticing you're getting these threads about this particular question from prospects looking to buy one of our services. What if we did this a little different in our marketing? Okay, well, now let's go learn the principles of marketing and the tools and etc. Okay, well, really needs to be handled by sales. So a couple of years later, I'm over and working in sales. Okay, well, it seems like our finance and our packing of products and shipping them to customers could be improved. And let's look at this. And so kind of going place to place and establishing best practices gave me the, let's say, the social equity to have influence with the people. And as my managers, I couldn't thank them enough for just watching me and saying, maybe you need to, take this function under your wing. That pattern sort of built the staircase to where I am with stakeholder-centered coaching right now. I will be the absolute first to say that I'm so disproportionately fortunate to have the opportunities that I do, to have the influence that I do. And the thing that brings me the most joy about it is that I can find great people like you, like Bill Summers, like Bill Zeeb, like Inderjeet Singh, like so many of our coaches, and give them the platform that I was given to self-actualize and to really bring stakeholder-centered leadership to everyone. Because our vision is that everyone deserves a stakeholder-centered leader. That can't be done by one person or a handful of people or an executive team. We need thousands of coaches like-minded with a similar work ethic, similar drive to actually go out there and move that needle forward. So that's kind of how I came into leadership. It was never something I aspired to. Even as a musician, I used a pseudonym, which we won't discuss here because I never wanted to be a face. I wanted to be a sound. And leadership sort of happened by accident. I don't regret it nor resent it, but it was certainly not something that I set out to achieve, if that makes sense.